In this volume, we're going to concentrate on footwork. The first thing I'm going to teach you is our basic on-guard fighting stance. Then I'm going to cover the mistakes a lot of people make when they try to assume this stance. And then we're going to go into actual footwork drills and techniques that'll help develop you into a superior knife fighter. Remember, there are no great knife fighters that don't have great footwork, so you need to pay very careful attention to this tape and practice these techniques diligently. All right, let's get to the gym and start training. To assume our basic fighting knife stance or posture, what I want you to do is to stand like this with your feet about shoulder distance apart in a pretty wide area so you have room to move. Now what I want you to think that you're in the middle of a giant clock. 12 o'clock is directly in front of you. 6 o'clock is directly to your rear. 3 o'clock is directly to your right. And 9 o'clock is directly to your left. Next, I want you to take one step forward if you're right-handed with your right leg. You're going to reverse this if you're left-handed. So you can take one step forward. Now, not a long step, just an average one medium step forward. Now what I want you to do is I want you to turn and look at 11 o'clock on your giant clock. And I want you to turn your feet so your toes are both pointing at 11 o'clock. Both toes pointing at 11 o'clock. Now what I want you to do is I want you to lift your heel on your rear leg. If you're right-handed, that's your left leg. I want you to lift your heel about 2 inches off the ground. I want it off high. And I want you to exaggerate that because this is going to be your spring. By picking your heel up, you can make your rear leg spring-like. So it's really important that you constantly do this when you're assuming this stance. We want to see that heel up. Next, I want you to take your left shoulder and pull it back like this. What that's going to do is going to narrow the target that you present to your opposing enemy. You're going to narrow your target by pulling your shoulder back. Now, I want you to raise your knife hand up until the point of your knife is pointed at your opponent's eyes. Your arm shouldn't be entirely straight like that. There should be a slight bend in your arm, just like that. Now, I want you to take your left hand and bring it over here and put it on your left pec. I want you to pin your elbow to your side like that, okay? Next, I want you to bend both knees slightly. Your knees should have a slight flex in them. Your knife should be pointed at your opponent's face, at his eyes. Your left hand, we call this the live hand, should be on your left pec. Your left elbow should be pinned in. Make sure your shoulders turn back like this to present a narrow opening. Now, your head should be upright. It shouldn't be crouched, and your head shouldn't be forward. Try to stay as upright as you can and keep that shoulder pulled back to narrow the target. Now, I want you to make sure that you don't let your live hand creep over here to the middle of your chest or to your right pec, because it'll be of less use over there than it will here. When it's on your left pec, you can use it to cross with, you can use it to hook with, you can use it to shovel hook with, you can use it to uppercut with, you can throw an overhand right with it. You can really make it work for you. And you can also use it defensively, which we'll teach later. But when it's over here, all you can do is backhand slap or backhand chop. It limits your offense when you put it all the way over here. So I don't want it on your right pec. I want it here on your left pec. So what you're going to do is you're going to settle in here again. Your feet are at 11 o'clock. Your shoulders pulled back to narrow the target. Your left hand's on your left pec. Your elbows pinned. Your right elbow's pinned into your side, your knife pointed at your opponent, and you're upright and your knees are bent. This is our basic on-guard fighting stance. While you're practicing adopting our fighting stance, I want you to be aware of some common faults that many students make, or mistakes they make when they assume this stance. One of the most common faults or mistakes is when people come on guard and they get in their fighting stance, instead of pulling their shoulder back, they tend to stand too square like this, presenting a wide profile to their opponent's blade. What you do when you stand square is you expose this flank, and we're going to go into detail later about that. But I want you to really be aware of, and look in a mirror. A mirror is a fabulous training tool. Look in the mirror and make sure that you've pulled your left shoulder back and you've got your knife in the right position, your elbows are tucked in, okay? Another mistake that I see a lot of people make is when they assume this stance, they crouch. They bend forward like this, they drop their head. Some people even bring up their live hand And a lot of people even come up higher with their knife like this. So when I'm like this and I'm boxing, this is a good defensive posture. But it doesn't really work with a knife fight, because what you're doing is you're giving your opponent your face. Your knife is really close to your face. Instead of in your on-guard fighting stance, when your knife's here, your opponent's blade has to go a long ways before it gets to your face. It's a long time for you to intercept his knife. But when you crouch and you pull your knife up like this, your face is just inches from your knife. You've got just a moment of reaction time before that blade hits your face. So I don't want you to crouch. The other mistake I see is that when people step forward, they don't step one step distance or one shoulder's distance between their feet. They get too wide. You don't want your feet more than shoulder's distance apart, because it starts to affect your balance, and it also tends to make you square immediately to your opponent. When I'm standing here like this, I'm wide, my balance is affected, it's not optimal, and I'm exposing my flank here. So I don't want you to do that. The other common mistake is when they step forward on guard into the fighting posture, they get too narrow. Their feet are less than a shoulder's distance apart. This really makes you wobbly. You don't want to be like that either. Really, truly, shoulder's distance apart is about optimal for most people. You don't want to be too wide, and you don't want to be too narrow in your stance. The other thing you don't want is you don't want your stance to be too long. You only take one normal step forward and turn your feet to 11 o'clock, pull your shoulder back to narrow your body. Okay? Don't take a long step, because then, again, you're wobbling around here. You can't move forward, backwards, to the side as adroitly as you could if you had a slightly shorter stance, a more correct stance. So don't make your stance too long. The opposite of that is to make your stance too short. Instead of taking a normal step forward, you take more of a baby step forward like this, and you turn like that. Now, again, we're wobbling all over the place. We're not in optimal balanced position. So you don't want your legs to be too narrow. You don't want them too close together either, or too short. Another mistake that I see people make is they let this alive hand drift out away from their body. When you come on guard, turn your feet to 11 o'clock, pull this shoulder back, pin your left elbow in, pin your hand here, your knife hand comes up, the point's at your opponent's face, you're standing upright, your knees are slightly bent. Don't let this alive hand start drifting out like this. You can let it rest on your pec or hover an inch or so off your left pec, but don't let your hand turn out like this. Don't let your arm drift out. Don't let your elbow drift out. Keep that in tight, because this is a prime target for an experienced knife fighter. I mean, he'll pick this off in a heartbeat if he sees this drift away from your body. When you keep it in close to your body, he has to reach in really deep in front of your knife. His blade's got to come all this way in to attack your hand. But when you turn it out like this, you give him 5 or 6 inches easy that he doesn't have to go as far to get to cut your fingers off. He cuts one of those fingers off, you're in a lot of trouble. So you want to keep that pinned in tight, and don't give him an easy target. The other thing I want you to do, and I see is people as they flop their knife all over the place. You want to keep your knife, when you're in your basic fighting stance, especially as a beginning fighter, in what we call a window of movement. We want it in between your hips, between your shoulders. So it's right in here. It describes this window of movement. Your knife is constantly in motion inside this window, but don't let it drift too high and don't let it drift too low. Keep it above your waist and below your chin, right in this window of movement. Don't let it come out to either side like that. That'll leave you unprotected. If your knife's over here, you can't defend this flank. If it's over here, you can't defend this part of your body. If it's too high, you can't defend your legs. And if it's too low, you can't get it up in time to defend your face. So you want to keep it right in this window of movement. Now, for training purposes, we're going to pretty much hold it still to begin with so we can concentrate on our footwork. But you want to keep in mind that when you're actually fighting, your knife hand is always in motion. Okay? Stand upright and don't let this drift out. One of the major truths about knife fighting is this: there are no superior knife fighters who don't possess superior footwork. You need superior footwork if you're going to be a successful knife fighter. You see, footwork for knife fighting is different than any other sport. In other sports, quite often you need to bring power to accomplish your goal. In knife fighting, you don't. If I'm boxing and I want to throw a cross, I've got to dig in with my rear foot. This foot's going to dig in, I'm going to sink my body weight, and I'm going to throw that cross. okay? In knife fighting, all I have to do is snap my wrist to destroy my opponent's life forever. All I have to do is bring my body in range, and I don't care how you get there. It has to go really quickly, on balance, and drop that knife down. I don't have to bring power, though. That's the big difference in knife fighting footwork versus any other sport or any other combat, is the blade does the work for you. You don't need muscle. You don't need power. You don't need weight. All you need is speed and some balance. So your footwork is really important. It has to be smooth. It has to be adroit. It has to be clever. It can't be slow or ponderous. And you really, really need to develop this aspect if you're going to be a good knife fighter. You have to have good footwork. So we're going to start right now on working on developing your footwork so that you can be a superior knife fighter too. The first thing I want to do in teaching you footwork is to teach you how to move forward and backwards. What I'd like you to do is get in front of a big mirror if you can. Start with your feet shoulders distance apart and assume our basic on-guard fighting stance, okay? Your feet are shoulders distance apart, your knees are slightly flexed, your palm is on your left pec, you're going to pull your shoulder back, your knife's pointed at your opponent, your elbows are pinned in, your knees are slightly flexed, and your heel's off the ground. You're in a good fighting stance. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to use your rear leg. That's your left leg for you right-handed people. That's going to be your spring. You're going to push off, take a step, and recover. Push off, take a step, and recover. Push off, take a step, and recover. Now, to go to the rear, we're going to reverse things. Now our front leg is going to be the spring. We're going to push off with our front leg, reach back, and recover. Push off, reach back, and recover. Push off, reach back, and recover. Push off, reach back, and recover. To go forward, you're going to push off with your rear leg, take a step, and recover. Push off, take a step, and recover. Push off, take a step, and recover. Push off, take a step, and recover. Let's go one more time to the rear. Push off with your front leg, take a step, and recover. Push off, take a step, and recover. Now, look in the mirror. Are your feet shoulders distance apart? Are they too wide? Are they too long? Are they too short? Are they too narrow? Are you over teetering like this? It's really easy when you're moving to come out of your basic fighting stance, especially when you stop movement. As I move forward and I move back, when I come down and stop moving, I want to be in a good fighting position. I want to be able to attack or defend instantly. I want to end up on balance. That's why I'm going to keep stressing, correcting your fighting posture, your fighting stance, so that you're always in a perfect position to respond to your opponent. Now, as we go through this tape, I'm not going to bore you with endless repetitions of footwork, but that doesn't mean you don't have to do them endlessly. I can't tell you how many thousands of hours in the last 23 years I've been practicing knife fighting I've spent on footwork drills. You're going to have to practice until these are second nature. But we're not going to spend all of our time in this presentation just working on one or two drills. Sometimes you're going to need to move forward or backwards in a hurry. What we call this in our knife fighting footwork is a rapid advance or a rapid retreat. To execute these footwork movements, what I want you to do is come on guard. Now what I want you to do is, with your left foot or rear foot, take a step forward and just continue like this and come down on guard. To go backwards, you're going to take your front leg and move it back like this. And when you stop, you always want to come on guard. Always stop with your knife hand in front. You always want to keep your body behind your knife, and you always want to end up in a good fighting stance. Now, when you start to advance rapidly, and we're going to go a little bit slow here, I want you to remember that you may have to attack or defend at any moment in time as you're moving forward. The same thing when you're going rapidly to the rear. You may have to defend or attack any time as you're moving backwards. So you got to keep that in mind. You don't want to disturb your balance. You want to keep on balance as much as you possibly can when you're moving rapidly forward and to the rear. You need to practice this in the mirror hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, because quite often you'll take your opponent at a moment in time and cut him or stab him by this rapid advance. Being able to quickly come forward and attack someone, or quickly get out of the way and come down on balance, will serve you in good stead as a knife fighter. I don't care what kind of fighting you're practicing. I don't care if it's boxing, I don't care if it's wrestling, I don't care if you're using a saber or a stick or an épée or a walking stick. I don't care if it's using a knife or a butcher's cleaver. You have to learn to move to the side. You have to learn to move laterally. And you can't stand rooted like a tree and fight like this. You're going to have to learn to move laterally. It's super important in knife fighting, and we want you to really take some time and practice learning how to move to the side. Here's how we're going to teach it. What I want you to do is step forward, assume your basic knife fighting stance. Okay? Look in the mirror, get a good stance going. Okay? Now, the key to moving laterally correctly is always to move the foot closest to the direction you want to go. If you want to go to the right, your right foot moves first. If you want to go to the left, your left foot or rear foot moves first. Whatever direction you want to go, that's the leg that's closest to it. That's the one that's going to move first. You have to discipline yourself to do this. And don't do stuff like this and get crossed up. That'll really hurt you in the end, and we're going to go into more about that in a minute. So get in a good knife fighting stance. Now what I want you to do is push off with your rear leg, and you're going to take a step to the side and recover. Take another step and recover. Take another step and recover. Now, to move your left, you're going to do the same thing. Take a step and recover. Take a step and recover. Take a step and recover. Now look down. Are you in a good knife fighting posture? Are your toes pointed at 11 o'clock? Is your left hand on your left pec? Are your elbows pinned in? Is this shoulder pulled back? Don't let it push forward a little bit like I had mine right there. Pull it back. Get that target narrow to your opponent, okay? We're going to move to the left again. Take a step and recover. Take a step and recover. Now, don't get too narrow. I'm exaggerating there. Don't let your feet get like this. Don't get them too long. Don't get them too short. Don't let them too wide and stand here square to your opponent. I want you in a good knife fighting stance. We're going to move to the right again. Step and recover. Step and recover. Step and recover. Step and recover. Go to the left. Step and recover. Step and recover. Step and recover. Step and recover. That's how you basically move laterally. The key is to move the foot closest to the direction you want to go and to stay as much as possible in your correct knife fighting stance so that when you stop motion, you're on balance, ready to move, ready to attack, ready to defend. Quite often, taking one lateral step or one sideways step won't get you out of trouble. When you're fighting and you take one step, sometimes it's not enough. Your opponent can still reach you. My friend Dr. G, he's both my friend and mentor, taught me a long time ago that when you move laterally away from an opponent that's attacking you, quite often what happens is when you move to the side, he cuts and you move and he misses. But then he leans and he backhand cuts and he catches you because you only took one step. So what I want to do now is to teach you how to move laterally with 2 and 3 steps at a time. So what you're going to do is you're going to get in your basic fighting stance. Again, get in front of a mirror. That's the greatest training tool for footwork that you can possibly acquire. Get in front of a good mirror. Look at yourself in the mirror. Is your stance good? Now, what I want you to do is to take multiple steps to the side and come down in balance. Go to the other side and come down in balance. Let's try it again a little slower. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Come down. Look at yourself. Look at your stance. Is it correct? Now, as we speed this up, here's what I've noticed in my training classes happens. As you move laterally with several steps, what happens is, look at me in the mirror here. I'm all tilting all around like this. As you take multiple steps laterally, what most people do is their stance tends to narrow. They get like this. This is how you end up. Every time you step, your feet get closer and closer together to when you stop, you're like this. You're too narrow. Here's a little trick to prevent that. As you move to the side, you take a normal step with your front leg. If you're going to the right, that's your right leg. I take a normal step and a half recovery step with your rear leg. Step, half. Step, half step. Step, half step. Come down, you're just about right. When you go to the left, you take a normal step to your left with your rear leg and about a half a step with your right leg and recover, just like that. Normal and half. Normal and half. Normal and half. Look down. You're just about right if you do that. This takes a little practice. So you need to get used to moving to the side laterally, quickly, and coming down in balance, on guard, ready to fight. Oftentimes when you're fighting at long range, you want to break contact with your opponent and take big steps laterally. You want to bring him out in a circle and draw him out so that as you make him move around you, he starts to lose his concentration and his defensive posture starts to break down, and he starts to give you openings that you can penetrate with your offense. Earlier, we showed you how to move laterally with one step and multiple steps. Now, I want to teach you how to move in big lateral motions where you're going to take up a lot of ground. Let's say that I want to make a half circle around my opponent. From my on-guard fighting stance, I'm going to pull my right leg back till it's parallel with my left leg. Now I'm going to push off, and I'm going to move like this, around in a big circular fashion. Now, to come on guard, I can step forward and come on guard, or as I move in big motions laterally, I can come backwards and come on guard. When you come on guard this way, you're being more aggressive. As you move laterally this way and you pull back, you're being more passive. When you want to drive somebody off, you come on guard and move forward and threaten them. When you want to suck them in and lure them in, you're moving like this and come on guard, and you move backwards like that and come on guard. And that will draw them in so you can get your own counterattack in. One of the ways to train big lateral movements, or circular movements if you will, is to buy some of these traffic cones. You can go to any of the box stores and you can find them there pretty cheap. I've got dozens of them that I use in my training, and they're almost indestructible and they're really useful. You won't regret buying them. What I do is I set mine out about 8 feet apart in this little square like this. To practice your big lateral motions, what I want you to do is to come on guard. If you can, set this up in front of a mirror, okay? Now remember to pull this front leg back till your feet are parallel, push off on your rear leg, and go around the cones. Now, what I don't want you to do as you're moving is to do this. Don't get your feet too close together. When you put your feet too close together like this, you could be knocked down and knocked out or knocked over, okay? What I want you to do as you're moving around is keep your feet shoulders distance apart as much as you can. Try to stand upright as much as you can. Don't get like this. In our training classes, I see everybody leaning like this. No, get upright and stay upright as you move around. Now when you want to stop, you just come on guard. To go the opposite way, you just reverse. You want to come on guard, and just keep going. You want to come on guard and come to the rear, pull your left foot back and come on guard. Practice that a lot. When you're fighting with a knife, one of the things I want you to be aware of is that your front leg is quite often a target. Particularly you tall guys, your front leg is really vulnerable to your opponent's knife. When you have a longer, higher leg, it's easier for a shorter man to attack this leg without disturbing his balance or his posture very much. If there's a tall man in front of me, I can attack his leg by just squatting just a little bit and easily get to his leg. So what I want you to do is become very adept at the defense for attack on your front leg. We call that defense a front leg replacement. What you do is you come in your basic on-guard fighting stance, okay? You imagine your opponent's in front of you, and he's going to cut this leg. What you're going to do is remove it, and we call this a front leg replacement. When you see that cut coming at this leg, you pull this foot back, touch down, and recover. Pull it back, touch down, and recover. Now this is a light, deft motion. You're keeping most of your weight on your rear leg. You're just touching down. So you pull it back, get it out of the way, and recover. Pull it back and recover. Pull it back, touch down, and recover. Now, here's some of the faults that I commonly see when I'm teaching this. The worst one, and the most grievous, is this. When people pull their leg back, they go like this. They rock. And their front leg goes behind their rear leg. They rock like this. That will never go in a knife fight. You'll never get your leg out of the way in time if you react that way to a cut at your leg. It has to come straight back. It has to be very quick and very light, just like this. Light, deft motion. Let's look at it from this angle. When you see that opponent cut at you, you pull your leg back and touch down. Pull it back and touch down, touch down, touch down, just like that. One of the strategies we use in our long-range knife fighting program is to use our footwork to take an opponent at that moment in time, in that place and time, with our knife when he doesn't expect it. In other words, we intercept him at a moment where he thinks he's safe. One of the footwork techniques I'm going to teach you next is called the lunge. I borrowed this from Western fencing. It's used both in épée, in foil, and in saber. Probably everybody does it a little bit different. I'm going to teach you a very deep, long lunge because our weapon is short. I don't have a 32-inch long 1796 light cavalry saber, which is my preferred saber. I don't have that. I've got a 14.5-inch overall long fighting knife. That's not a lot of reach, so I want to make that reach up with my lunge. To use the lunge properly, you'll take your opponent at a distance where he feels safe. For just a brief moment in time, he may be resting there, he may be thinking there, he may be moving, but you're going to stab him at a distance that he thinks he's safe at. Now, a lunge is to be used judiciously. You just don't use it at any whim. You've got to have some thought and planning in it, because when you lunge, you're in a precarious position momentarily. You're very committed, you've got a lot of weight forward, and it's hard to recover from. I'm going to demonstrate now how to do a lunge, and you'll see what I mean. What I want you to do is start with your feet shoulders distance apart. Step forward and assume our basic fighting stance, all right? Pull your shoulder back, get in good, look in the mirror, make sure your stance is right. Now, I want you to push off on your rear leg and take a big step forward with your front leg. You're going to bend your front knee until it covers your toe. You're going to pull your shoulder back. You're going to turn it. You're going to extend your hand. You're going to probably switch to a palm reinforced grip, or at least to a saber grip to get the most reach. Keep your chin over your knife, looking straight ahead. Keep your live hand and this elbow pinned in tight. Don't let them pooch out. Don't let your butt pooch out. I'm exaggerating that. Keep your butt tucked in, just like this. You want the maximum amount of reach that you can get. Okay? Now, to recover, you can push back off your front leg and come on guard, or you can bring up your rear leg and come on guard. When you recover by pulling this leg back, it shows a little bit more passivity. When you recover by bringing up your back leg, it shows a little bit more aggression. Both require strength, so they're slow. When you make that lunge, you better make sure that you're going to connect, because you're going to be vulnerable for a few split seconds while you're making the recovery. So it has to be used very judiciously, but it can be very effective. Here's another view of the lunge from the side. Assume your on-guard fighting stance, push off, take a big step, lean in, pull your shoulder back, and extend. Keep your head up. Don't turn your head to the side like this. Keep your head looking straight ahead, because you may have to defend from this position. As you recover, you may have to defend. So you have to have your face towards your opponent. Another way to attack your opponent at a long distance where he thinks he's safe at is with the fléché. I use the fléché quite often when I'm fighting, because it allows me to take up a lot of ground very quickly in one motion and score my opponent at a range where he thinks he's safe, where he thinks I can't touch him. And it differs a little bit from the lunge, and I'm going to demonstrate it now. It has a lot of advantages, but it shares the same disadvantages as the lunge in that it's a very committed motion. When you use this fléché, you better have a clear opening, a real opportunity that you're pretty certain is going to be effective when you initiate this movement, because your recovery is slow. Come in your fighting stance. Now, this time you're going to take a big step forward with your rear leg. A big step forward. You're going to bend that front knee. You're going to pull this shoulder back. You're going to lean as far forward as you can and extend your knife arm in a palm reinforced grip. Just like that. And you're going to take up a lot of ground in one big step. To recover, you can push off on this leg and push all the way back and come on guard, or you can pull your rear leg up and come on guard. Either way. Again, when you go forward, you're showing aggression. When you're going back, you're being more passive. They both have advantages. Sometimes you may fléché just from outside of range. And as he thinks he's got something going on, he's going to step in, you can pull back and attack him. Void that space and cut into it. thinks he senses an opportunity. There's lots of things you can play with a lunge and fléché. Let's look at it from this angle. Going to come on guard. Get a good guard position. Take a big step and extend. Don't look to the side. Don't let your face turn to the side. Don't let your butt pooch out. Keep your butt tucked in tight. And recover. One of the hardest things to learn how to do when you're practicing knife fighting footwork is to learn to move diagonally. But it's probably the most important thing that you can learn to do well. You see, when you're knife fighting, almost everything keys around diagonal footwork. Whether you're on offense or defense, you're going to have to move diagonally. You're never going to be able to be a pillar of salt and sit here and fight like this. You're always going to have to move diagonally. But it's a little harder to learn than anything else that I've showed you so far, so I want you to pay close attention, and I'm going to go slow, and I'm going to do the very best job I can to teach you how to move diagonally. It's super, super important because almost everything you're going to do, you're going to use diagonal footwork. The first thing I want to teach you is how to move diagonally to the right. The way we're going to practice this is I've got some strips of tape here on our training floor. They're about 8 foot long, and they form a giant X. I'm going to stand here in the middle of the X, and I'm going to pretend my opponent is directly in front of me, just like this. To move diagonally forward, that's the first thing I want to teach you. You're going to come in your fighting stance, okay? You right-handers, you have your right leg forward. You left-handers, you're going to have to reverse my instructions. So I'm going to go slow so you can practice at home and reverse everything for your left-handed lead, okay? So you're in your fighting stance. You see your opponent's incoming attack. It could be a straight stab at your abdomen. It could be an angling in machete chop. Doesn't make any difference. You're going to go diagonally forward to the right to get away from it. So what you're going to do is you're going to push off on your rear leg. You're going to take a big step at a 45-degree angle. That gets you at angle of your opponent, and you're going to pivot around to face him. Let's try it again. You're on guard. You see that attack coming. You're going to angle 45 degrees with a big step. Now, because our principle is get your knife in front of your body or your body behind your knife, you're going to pivot. This leg's going to pull you around like that so that your knife is in front and you're still facing your opponent. Now, the point in time when you use this is quite often when you see a forehand blow coming from this side. The blow is coming this way, and you're going to move away from it diagonally this way. It gives you more time to read that incoming attack and to respond to it. So when I see a motion coming at me this way, I'm going to step away from it this way to get more time to react to it. I'm going to have Ron come in and illustrate that. Ron's going to stand here with his back to you. And as he cuts slow, cut one, I'm going to step over here and get to the side. Let's go again. Cut number one. I'm going to step here. As I step, I intercept his attack, and I end up with my body behind my knife ready to fight. That's where you use that forward diagonal stepping. So for you right-handers, you're going to push off, take a step, and you're going to pivot around. You're going to pull your body back around behind your knife and come on guard. Okay. To go to our left, it's a little different. You see the attack coming from this side. It's coming at you this way, and you want to step over here. So our principle for movement is we always move the leg closest to the direction we want to go. So when I see that attack coming, I'm going to take a step with my left leg here, and I'm going to turn back into my opponent. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move forward diagonally with my first step. Now, watch. I make a little adjustment step here, and I turn back into my opponent where my body is behind my knife. Let's see it one more time. You're on guard. Pull that shoulder back, get a good on guard position. You see that attack coming, you step here, and you turn back. That turn back is really important. In reality, what you're going to do is, come here, Ron. Cut number two is I'm going to come here. As I see that cut coming in, and now I'm going to come back and get behind my knife. So, there. As he cuts, and now I adjust. I get my body behind my knife. That's how you use that diagonal stepping. Thanks, Ron. Now I want to show you how to move to the rear. You come on guard, get in your fighting stance. I want to move diagonally to my rear. Again, using our principle, moving the foot that's closest to the direction you want to go, I'm going to pull my right leg back this way with a good sized step backwards. As I step back, I'm going to pull my leg around behind me like that. I'm going to pivot around to get my body behind my knife. Let's try it again. I'm going to step and pivot and come down on balance, ready to fight. Now in reality, you're going to deal with that attack as you step right in here. As you finish your movement, you're going to end up with your body behind your knife, ready to move. Let's go a little slower. These backward steps are harder, especially this one going to the right diagonally. It's hard to perfect. I've did it hundreds of times and practicing on my own. So you step and you pivot. You step and you pivot behind and come on guard, ready to fight. It's easier to move to your left. All you do here is you reach back with your left leg because it's closest to the direction you want to go, and you take a little replacement step. So I reach back and I turn back into my opponent, get my body behind my knife, just like that. Another valuable footwork technique that I think should be in every knife fighter's arsenal of tricks is what I call the leap and cut. This should be in everybody's repertoire because it can be very effective. It has to be used judiciously. You can't use it repeatedly because someone will key to it and cut you when you're doing it. But when it's used correctly, it can be very effective. The best way to use the leap and cut is, and I'm going to demonstrate, Ron, come on guard, is what I'll do is I'll try to draw Ron's attention up. It's really useful when you see somebody tracking your knife hand. When you see them watching or keying on your knife hand, following your knife hand around, this is a really good technique to use because you can bring your knife this way. You bring your knife up. As you bring your knife up, you jump in, cut him, and jump out with your palm up, just like that. So to execute the leap and cut, you raise him. Raise him with your body. Look how I kind of lift my whole body up, everything. It's a little accentuated. And as I see him react to that, I leap in, cut him, and leap out. Now, when you're down there underneath his knife, it's pretty scary. So that when you do this, raise him, leap in. Now watch, keep your eyes up. As he descends, cut him. If he drops on you, be ready to turn your palm up and intercept his knife hand. That's the leap and cut. In my mind, one of the characteristics of a great knife fighter is his comfort and skill in moving backwards. There's many times in knife fighting that you have to move backwards very quickly. Nothing else will do in that particular moment. Moving to the side won't get you out of trouble. Your defense won't get you out of trouble. You have to move backwards. It's really important that we all get comfortable as knife fighters moving backwards. One of the things that I start each of my classes doing is just simply moving backwards. We'll come up to a mark on the training hall and we'll just move backwards like this. And then we'll just repeat it. Now, we have a pretty big training facility here. It's about 2,600 square feet, so we have a lot of room to move backwards. And what I'm walking on right now are cushioned pads or tile squares that cover our entire training facility. And you can see patterns on these. And what I'll do is, with our class, is we'll actually form like a conga line. And the whole class will line up, and they'll follow me walking backwards. So this is a good drill that you can do at home, is just learn to walk backwards and get used to looking over your shoulder and using your peripheral vision to tell you when to make your turns. And try to make your turns neat and concise so that you can develop your skill and comfort and moving adroitly backwards. Okay? Lots of different ways that you can practice this. When you're going for your walk every day, try every 10 minutes to put in 200 steps moving backwards whenever possible. So every 10 minutes as you're walking, you want to spend 200 steps moving backwards. That'll give you a lot of invaluable practice and get you used to using your peripheral vision to help yourself as you move around. Another way to increase your skill in moving backwards is to get out your traffic cones that you bought and set them out in a square with one in the middle and just practice walking around and between those traffic cones. It's very easy to do, doesn't take much time, but it really helps you in developing your coordination and adroitness at moving backwards. All you have to do is just move around the cones like this. And you can start out slow at first, and you make up the patterns as you go. And just move around them. As you get better, you want to cut in a little tighter to that cone and make that turn a little tighter. We're not going to spend all of the tape having you watch me work or walk backwards, but this is something that you can practice at home. Doesn't take a training partner, but it'll really help your ability as a knife fighter moving backwards. Another way to improve your skill as a knife fighter is to practice footwork drills at home. I call this solo practice. What you want you to do is to incorporate all the things that we've already taught you, all the different footwork methods we've taught you, incorporate that in your own solo practice. Here's a good way to start out. Here's how I usually start out. I'll come on guard, and I'll look in the mirror, and I'll come back a couple steps. And then I'll come forward a couple steps, concentrating on staying on balance when I come down. Then I'll squirt to the side for a few steps, squirt back to the other side, move backwards, move to the side. Maybe I'll move diagonally, come back on guard, move to the side. Maybe I'll break into some circular movement, come on guard, pull back, go the other way, come on guard the other way, keep moving, step in, step back out, step in, step in, step in, step out, squirt to the side. One thing to remember whenever you're practicing going backwards is you can seldom afford to take more than a couple steps backwards without scooting out to the side. When you go backwards, if you don't move laterally pretty quickly, you're going to get overrun. Try this at home. Make up your own footwork solo drills. This concludes the training we're going to do in this volume. Remember, repetition is your friend. You need conditioned reflexes, and the only way you're going to get them is to practice these techniques thousands and thousands of times. Remember your safety. Always wear a fencing mask when you're training and protect your vision, as no one can replace your eyesight. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it.